Good morning, thanks for joining me here on a beautiful sunny June day. It's the 27th of June today, so I have had a silly idea basically to make my life difficult. A few years ago I did Plastic Free July and it went quite well, and I was meaning to kind of keep doing it every year and just, refine my household and get things better and better. But I can't remember what happened. I got distracted or something, or busy. But I'm going to give it another go this year. So in just a few days' time, for the whole month of July, I will be trying to avoid using single-use plastic. This is trickier for me this year because I'm house sitting for about 13 or 14 days during July, sort of 4 days at the beginning, then I'm back at my house for a few days, and then I'm house sitting for a different client again for another 10 days. So I will be away from my own stuff and supplies and resources. So it'll be interesting if that makes things easier because I'm, living out of a backpack, or living out of my bike pannier bags is more accurate, or if it makes it harder because I just don't have access to my stuff. Obviously, though, this is a booktube channel, so you're like, why is she telling us this? Because I've decided to link it together with books, and for all of July I will be reading environmental books. I've got a little initial TBR. Sorry if you see me looking distracted. I'm house sitting a cat and a dog, and we're all out enjoying the sunshine, but they are, oh goodness knows what they're up to. So I don't think these are the only books I will read this month. I think I'll still do some regular reading in between, but I have a bit of a TBR in mind that I'd like to get through some of these this month. So the initial ideas are 10 Million Aliens, A Journey Through Our Strange Planet by Simon Barnes. This is a book all about insects, I believe. Next up, The Sea Around Us by Rachel Carson, a classic book about ocean conservation and sustainability, I believe. Then we have The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean. This is a investigative journalist looking into a case around the theft of wild orchids from Florida's swampland environment. Then 39 Ways to Save the Planet by Tom Heap. That is not actually about individual action, which is what the title makes it sound like. It's 39 case studies of technology that's being developed to help us as a society be more sustainable. Then there's also Braiding Sweetgrass, the audiobook that I started during my audiobook week but haven't finished, so hopefully I'll get it finished this month. I've also got a graphic novel anthology called The Most Important Comic Book in the World. That's a real mix of very short, almost like Sunday newspaper comic strips, and some that are a few pages longer. I think there's quite a lot of contributors to that, but I'll have a look when I'm back at home and grab it, and it should be a fairly easy read. And then the other ones I have in mind I don't actually own. They're not on my owned TBR, but I've just heard of them and they seemed interesting. So there's one called Nature's Warnings, and it's classic science fiction with an ecological plot line or theming. Then there's a book called Some We Love, Some We Hate, Some We Eat by Hal Herzog. I saw this years and years ago and the concept intrigued me, so I'll try and get my hands on a copy from the library or something. I believe it's looking at our relationship with animals and about why we are okay with eating some of them and not others, and why we classify animals differently. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm interested to read that even though I'm a vegetarian, because I find not eating animals really, really, really easy. But I know that some of my colleagues, when it's been mentioned before, there's some real barriers mental barriers that I just don't have. So I'm interested to see what the writer says. So yeah, those 8 books are my initial TBR. I won't get through 8. That would require me pretty much only reading these for the entire month, and I do want to break it up with some regular normal reading. I think that's a good mix, so a bit of graphic novels, a bit of audiobook, a bit of short stories, a bit of fiction, a bit of non-fiction. That should be enough to be able to mix it up and have some variety through the month and not get bored. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. a successful zero plastic shopping trip. I had gone in intending to get like tablets or powder or even a solid toothpaste bar, which is what I use at home, but this is actual paste. So we'll see how that goes. Fennel flavour. I couldn't even tell you what fennel tastes like, but the other option was charcoal, and I don't trust myself to not just end up with black teeth. Then a little deodorant to keep it work for when I cycle into work. Lavender and tea tree. And also a solid shampoo and conditioner pairing. These were quite expensive at £12 for both of them, but I know that the cost per use will be really small, like pennies or fractions of pennies. But I do find like there's quite a barrier to entry in terms of cost when it comes to zero waste or zero plastic lifestyle. A little treatsy for myself. I got oat milk chocolate bar. Cookies and cream flavour, or cookies and no cream, that's how it's branded. Then I lucked out with seeing it's not the farmer's market today, but there was a fruit and veg stall. It was a mix of plastic and not plastic, as these things often are, like the soft fruits were in plastic, but lots of it is also loose. I'm not really intending to do a lot of cooking whilst I'm house sitting, so I didn't buy things like onions, but I did get some bananas, no plastic stickers on those ones, some oranges. Then as I'm on my lunch break from work, I got my favourite plastic-free lunch option, which is a Cornish pasty, cheese and onion flavour. In book news, my audiobook hold for The Sea Around Us has come in, so I'll be eating my pasty whilst listening to Rachel Carson. Alright, back in my own house briefly. I'm here for 4 nights and then I go off house sitting again. I'm going to do some cooking to help me be successful in Plastic Free July. I generally find that these kind of challenges work better the more organised you are as a person. Like I would never need to pop out for, you know, a Boots meal deal full of single-use plastic if I could remember to pack my lunch every day for work. But I'm kind of middle of the road when it comes to organisation naturally. Today, as I've got the rest of the day to myself, I'm going to make some bread rolls and I'm going to try and make my own butter. I'm going to make some kind of snacky thing. I'm thinking like a peanut butter cookie kind of thing. All of these ingredients I can get plastic free from my local zero waste shop, or they're just in the little supermarket plastic free as standard. Do you think I could pass myself off as like a trad wife with all this bread making and butter making? Although I'm not actually married, so that's probably failing one of the primary requirements. Okay. Well, perhaps not as brown as I would have liked. They sound hollow, so that means they're cooked. With more than 1 million copies sold, Rachel Carson's The Sea Around Us became a cultural phenomenon when published in 1951 and cemented Carson's status as the preeminent natural history writer of her time. Her inspiring, intimate writing plumbs the depths of an enigmatic world, a place of hidden lands, islands newly risen from the world's crust, fish that pour through the water, and the unyielding, epic battle for survival. Firmly based in the scientific discoveries of the time, The Sea Around Us masterfully presents Carson's commitment to a healthy planet and a fully realised sense of wonder. Now I'm off to vote, as it's the 4th of July, so we've got a general election, and then drop off a cat key. I'll be listening to The Sea Around Us by Rachel Carson. I'm still carrying on with that as my audiobook for the time being. So I thought I'd give you a really quick overview of some of the plastic-free swaps that I've already made in our house over years and years, as I've found products that are easy swaps that I'm willing to make, and I find the product to be good. Because that's what people are often asking for when they're doing something like a plastic-free challenge is like, how do I substitute this thing for that? So these are just my recommendations. So kind of grouping them together by the companies or shops that I buy them from, whole higgledy-piggledy bunch of stuff, but basically for paper products, for things like kitchen roll, tissues and loo roll, I buy them from Who Gives a Crap, and it's just on subscription. It's super easy. Actually, a fair few of these things are on subscriptions, and as long as I can pause them or bring them forward, it's always very easy to manage. Then another one of my regular subscription purchases is from a company called Small. So they deliver my dishwasher tablets, which you can probably hear gurgling in the background, and also our laundry liquid pods. So they look like this. These are the like fragrance-free sensitive skin ones. You pop that in the machine with your clothes and it completely dissolves. And then in a similar kind of dissolving container method, I don't have these on subscription, I just get them as and when I need them, but it's from a company called Ocean Saver. So they do all these kind of cleaning sprays that you have around the house. So this one is for the bathroom, this one's for the kitchen, this one's multi-purpose. We've also got an antibacterial one. And they are very similar to the laundry pods. You pop that in a bottle, fill it with warm water and give it a shake, and everything dissolves together. This is the disinfectant one. So as long as you have a bottle you can already use, this is what it looks like when it's all shaken up. And then in a similar vein but a different company is called MAC. So this one is washing up liquid, this one is drain clearer, and this one is a different kind of drain clearer. And keeping on the theme of cleaning, instead of those like white and yellow sponges, we have these sponges. So they're very similar kind of design, but this side is a loofah and they're compostable. So when they're all worn out, I chop them up or tear them up and chuck them in the wormery. Chris doesn't like using these though. He doesn't find them very effective. I think they're fine, but he complains. So we also have like scrubby brush things, so like natural fibre bristles. This one is for cleaning jars, and this is general, and then this one is for metal straws. That's the backup option. And then instead of like J-cloths, we have, sometimes these are called Swedish cleaning cloths, but they're becoming more common and aren't always called that. Obviously this is from Ocean Saver, but other brands sell them as well, other shops. So they're made from cotton and like cellulose, like tree fibre. They don't dissolve or anything, and they're sturdier than a normal cotton cloth. And you can chuck them in the washing machine. But when you're done with them, again, chop them up and put them in the compost bin or wormery. Another company that is on subscription is Bauer Collective. We get all our like liquid stuff from them because they deliver in these reusable pouches. So the things I get include like body wash, hand soap, toilet cleaner, washing up liquid, shampoo, conditioner. And the idea is they deliver in these pouches, but then you refill your own container at home. And then after you've emptied your pouch, you pop it in an envelope that they give you. You might be able to see there's some in there already. You collect a few together in an envelope and send it back, and then they wash them out and refill them. So they're not they're plastic, but they're not single-use plastic. That's all the kind of cleaning stuff I could think of. In terms of bathroom products or beauty products, Upcircle is the brand I favour. They use food waste ingredients in their beauty products. So I've got a moisturiser that uses date stones, like ground up date stones, and this is a face scrub which is using leftover coffee grounds, and all their packaging is plastic free as well. If you shave your body hair, then I also recommend getting an old safety razor. I just bought this one online, and then the blades are super easy to buy from my refill store, and they last a really long time, each of the blades, but they are wickedly sharp when you first put them on the handle, so be careful. Then there are a few of the like really entry level tips that all the plastic free websites tell you, like take a tote bag out shopping, but I don't need to recommend a particular tote bag to you. And all the best ones I've bought have been in New Zealand, so I couldn't even tell you where to buy them on this side of the world. The only thing I will recommend is, places often say take a reusable coffee cup Now, I have used a lot of reusable coffee cups and some of them are absolutely rubbish, but this one, this brand, is perfect. It's by far the best. It's everything I could want from a coffee cup. It's called Circular & Co, the brand, but the most important feature is, for me, is the lid pops open and closed, and the seal inside is really good, so when it's closed you can fully chuck it in your bag, tip it upside down, and it doesn't matter, it won't leak. And then there's other features like you can drink from any point on the top, and occasionally they come in nice designs. This originally had bees and beehive pattern on it, but I've been using it for so long they're pretty much worn off, and what's left looks like it's like a weird mutant. I think that's it in terms of like most of the things I use. I mean, you've already seen the toothpaste and shampoo and conditioner that I use when I'm traveling because they're solid. I have no brand loyalty to solid shampoo bars, so I wouldn't particularly recommend one over any of the others. Most of this was readily available online, some from, you know, their particular stores like the Bauer Collective website, and some are just like general plastic-free shopping websites like Seep. They do a lot of stuff, and Peace with the Wild, that was another one that I bought random bits and bobs from. I forgot to say my deodorant is from the brand called Wild. That's pretty well known on YouTube because they sponsor people. This is not sponsored by anyone, obviously. My channel is far too small to get sponsorship from anything. Yeah, I think that's everything I use in terms of consumables. Obviously then there's like clothing brands like Rapa Nui, they're really great. They do, I believe all their clothing is organic cotton, and the factory where it's all printed is print on demand and powered by renewable energy, and then the packaging that they send it to you in is plastic free. And you know, and then there are brands like BAM. I bought leggings off there before for bamboo leggings, and everything's plastic free. But honestly, most of my clothes come from charity shops, which is possibly one of the most sustainable options. Although when I'm washing the plastic, the polyester and synthetic fibres, I do wonder about the microplastics. I've heard of something called a guppy bag, where you put your synthetic clothing into first of all and then pop the whole thing in the wash. But I've never actually seen one for sale in the UK. I've only heard of them from Americans. Yeah, I think that's everything around the house that we have and use so far, and that I would recommend. Oh, we also found a company that it's not plastic free, but it makes clothes pegs and clotheslines out of recycled fishing nets that are damaged, so they would have ended up in the ocean as part of the ghost fishing problem, but this company takes them and turns them into these clothes pegs. This is from Nona. But yeah, because of all these swaps that I've made gradually over a long time, and you know, I've got my systems in place and my subscriptions, and I know which websites to go to and yada yada, really the main problem that's left to me with a plastic-free lifestyle is the food packaging. And the solution to that is probably, as I said, being really organised and making lots of my own food. But I'm aware that this requires a luxurious amount of time and resources and effort. You know, even though I, you know, work a very flexible schedule and I'm a very supportive partner and I don't have any dependents, so I do have the luxury of time and effort. But even I can't keep on top of all of the thousands of small preparation steps that need doing to be completely plastic free. So we do what we can, which is the main thing when it comes to sustainability. It's like they're saying online, we don't need a few people doing zero waste perfectly, we need lots of people doing zero waste badly. As long as you're giving it a go and you're making some difference in your life or your community or your family. Just back from the farmer's market to do some plastic free shopping. So I'm at a new house for another house sitting. I'm here for 2 weeks, and I think on balance it is slightly easier to be plastic free when house sitting, because as I said, the food packaging was the big challenge for me in normal everyday life. Because I'm only at a place for a short amount of time and not all my meals are here. I find myself buying sort of ready to eat stuff, or like very, very basic ingredients. And they're just easier to get, relatively easy to get plastic free. I haven't succumbed to the temptation to have a Cornish pasty for lunch every single day, but that's an example of like It's very rare to find a Cornish pasty that would come in any plastic wrapping. That's just not how they're served. So at the farmer's market, got some eggs from the Shillingford Organics farmer's stall. I got spring onions, a little bit of dill that he let me have for free, some strawberries, and I also got like a whole bunch of mushrooms. But so I've still got plenty of my bread rolls, and so fried mushrooms and eggs on bread roll will be the perfect breakfast for, or even dinner for me. And then we come to the ready to eat stuff. Refried beans and cheese, pastry, a little pizza thing, flapjack, British flapjack, and my lunch treat will be a vanilla cream donut. So this is from 3 different stalls and cost me, I paid in cash, so I don't have the true receipts, but counting up my change, I think it was about £21. The most expensive stall was definitely the ready to eat treats, which makes sense. I'm about half an hour off from finishing The Sea Around Us by Rachel Carson, so I'll listen to that whilst having my lunch, and then I'll let you know what I think. I've tried to keep things thematic by standing in front of a map of the world and the oceans and all the animals. So it's now actually several days later. I took ages to finish The Sea Around Us. What do I think of it? Well, this is a hard one to review because I spent the first third of the book wondering what year it was published in. It's not something I look up before I start a book. And so it's published in 1951, which is important to bear in mind because it's a scientific book written by a marine biologist, but some of that science is now out of date and has been proven wrong. So quite near the beginning of the book, for example, she talks about basically saying there's no such thing as tectonic plates and continental drift. And when I first heard that, I kind of had a moment of thinking, hang on, did I hear that right? But because it was an audiobook, I just rolled on, and I was like, I'll come back to that later. But yeah, I have seen in other reviews people mention it, so I wasn't imagining it. I didn't even realise there was a point where there was the idea of continental drift, but people didn't think it was actually correct. But I guess maybe there's always a point with any scientific theory was the idea was being introduced, but the scientists aren't quite sure, agree with it or not. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is, some of the science is out of date. Now, some of it is quite distinct like that, where she makes a claim and you can look it up later and be like, no, actually that wasn't true, or that wasn't correct. Other stuff is really interesting to read scientific theories or things that she was researching that they just didn't have the answer to. And she was quite clear and honest, being like, this is what we've observed, this is what we think it might be, but we don't know for sure because of XYZ. Usually to do with the current technology. Like there was one situation where she said, can't get the cameras down deep enough in the ocean to see what's going on at this particular level because all the photos come out blurry, and humans can't go down because it's too deep and they get like the bends. Whereas nowadays, of course, digital cameras, better scuba diving equipment. And there was another example that stood out for me where she was talking about tornadoes and storms forming on somewhere way out in the oceans, and she said that sometimes they form and nobody knows they're forming because they are not on a flight path and they're not in the shipping lanes. And at that point in time, there was no such thing as satellites. There wasn't even the idea of satellites in her book. So that stood out to me as a moment of being like, oh yeah, we always know when storms are forming now because of satellites, but they had absolutely no clue. It could be, middle of nowhere, and they had no warning until it got much closer to land. So that was really interesting to see that moment in scientific knowledge, what they knew in 1951. And it was really refreshing to hear a scientist say, we just don't know. Like fully honest, or not trying to pass a best guess off as the definitive truth. So that was cool. I really wish they do an annotated, updated version where every time she says, current science does not know the answer to this conundrum, you could then have like an appendix at the back where you'd flip to the back and read
the answer, or even just read an updated. We still don't know. That would be interesting as well. But as far as I'm aware, that doesn't exist. So the book was actually about the sea in general and all various different elements of it. So there was things like the seabed geography, the sedimentary layers that are on the bed, things like tides, wave formation, the currents in the sea patterns, things like the Gulf Stream, sea levels, certain things around particular types of animals and plants living in the sea, and a little bit about human interaction with the sea. Another thing that was really interesting and really telling about it being very specifically written in 1951 or published in 1951 is there's no mention of the idea of climate change or even really global warming, but what there is the first signs are showing up at the time that she's doing her research and writing it all down. And so I have the benefit of 74 years in the future reading these descriptions, and I can see them immediately as like red flags of like, oh, this was the start of global warming. But she has no clue. Or like she kind of has an inkling, but they haven't put all the different things together and being like, oh no, these are all linked, and this is the result of humans burning fossil fuels. So she mentions things like in the chapter about tides, she talks about how, I think it's in a particular area in North America, the high tide is higher than it's ever been before. And in the chapter talking about water temperatures, she's talking about how the waters around Iceland are warmer than they normally are, and this has resulted in a particular type of cod showing up in Iceland where it never had before. Fishes that are used to warmer water appearing in places where it's traditionally much colder water, and how this affects things. I think there's the tiniest mention of glacial melt, but not hugely. But so she mentions these things, and it's like, we don't know why this is happening. We don't know why this is the highest tide ever in this region. But with retrospect, I'm like, wow, yeah, sorry, hun, it was global warming.
Hey, baby, you want some din-dins? It's not quite dinner time yet, darling.
In terms of the book, the writing in the book itself, it's so beautiful, like really poetic. I would never have guessed she was a scientist. And she does make some of the drier topics really like beautifully described and interesting. However, not even she can make the sediment on the seabed interesting for me, and sedimentary rocks and all that. That is the only chapter that I skipped the last section of, because I think it was the last 5 minutes of the audiobook. I just thought, oh, I can't listen to about seabed sediments anymore. And part of the reason I was surprised she didn't mention the human impact on the oceans was she's so famous for having written Silent Spring, which is about pesticide use, and was really kind of one of the books that launched off the ecological movement and the environmental movement, particularly in North America, and well, particularly in the West. The Sea Around Us was published, I think, 11 years before Silent Spring. So it's interesting that in that intervening time, she clearly come to some conclusions and done a lot more research and was linking things together and realizing the human impact on the environment. As with a lot of non-fiction that I read, I'm not going to give it a star rating. It would be so hard to rate for me anyway, personally, because it's like beautiful writing versus some very boring topics versus like out-of-date science versus interesting to see the out-of-date science. There's pros and cons to both sides. Then the next book I finished was The Orchid Thief. It's very much reminded me of a book I read a couple of years ago called The Dragon Behind the Glass, a book about an investigative journalist looking into the trafficking and trade of an endangered species and why people want it so badly that they're willing to break the law for it, and how people try and get around it, and the mania around a particular endangered species. In The Dragon Behind the Glass, it's the Asian arowana that she's writing about, and in The Orchid Thief, it's the ghost orchid. The book starts off with our writer reading about a court case in Florida where a man called LaRoche was arrested after he and 3 Native Americans went into a swamp to harvest orchids. The way they thought they were going to get around it is, so these orchids are endangered species and protected, but in Florida, or maybe all of America, Native Americans can harvest endangered species when it's used for like traditional medicines or religious practices or cultural practices. And so this white guy, LaRoche, kind of stood back and it was an advisor or a consultant almost for the guys who were doing the actual harvesting to take it back to the reservation where they were setting up a plant nursery and a lab. And LaRoche's kind of altruistic, kind of illegal idea was that if he could get a ghost orchid and then clone it, then it would no longer be an endangered species and people could have this beautiful flower without breaking the law, and maybe it would save the species. So that was his justification. And he was employed by the reservation, so that's his link to it. He was employed to set up the nursery. But they got caught red-handed and arrested, and it all went to court. And so there was conflicting laws about like the cultural protections for Native Americans versus the protections of the plants. And I think it was like state laws versus federal laws, and so it wasn't very clear-cut. And LaRoche thought he could be protected because he was employed by the reservation. Eventually the judge decided, yeah, you're employed by the reservation, but you're not a member of the tribe, so you don't get that protection. And he was fined and he had to stay away from the Fakahatchee swamp area for like a certain amount of time. But the book isn't really about the court case, it just starts off with that. And so the journalist then goes around and like interviews like orchid breeders and collectors and members, you know, the local orchid association and poachers. And she wanted to interview a drug smuggler who like was obsessed with orchids and used his drug running lines to also get endangered orchids. And it's very atmospheric about like describing the swamp and the heat and the humidity and the mud and the animals and the insects. It makes me realize I've never been to a swamp or even anything like it. I kind of thought, this is a very naive English view, but I kind of thought a swamp was like a series of lakes and there'd be dry land to walk around in between. But she talks about walking through the swamp like waist deep in silt, basically, in like black muddy water. And about every step is 3 steps because you have to feel for alligators and feel for, I think it was like tree roots before you can actually put your foot down. And I was like, oh, having never been to a swamp, I now don't think I ever want to walk through a swamp. And it's interesting because of course Florida has this reputation as being like full of crazy people basically. And some of these people are pretty crazy about their orchids. There's a conflict of like private collectors and people who do it sort of for a commercial purpose, and then people who want, you know, the purity of the flower versus hybrids. And there's the human nature being like collections and collectivism, the desire to collect things. And LaRoche himself almost certainly has like ADHD, even though I'm not a psychologist or whatever, psychologist. But the way he is like fully dives into this interest in orchids, having previously fully dived into an interest in ancient fossils, and then because of what happened with the court case and stuff, he then later fully dives into like computers because he basically wants a hobby or an interest or a job, which doesn't involve things dying on him because plants die too easily. And much like with The Dragon Behind the Glass, our journalist author spends a long time trying to find this like perfect example of ghost orchid, of the thing they're looking for, in her case a ghost orchid. I don't know if it's only lives in the Fakahatchee swamp or if there are other geographic areas, but certainly she sticks to that swampland area. And I won't tell you whether she manages to see one or not, but you have to read the book. And this was written in the 90s. So again, there's things that like just wouldn't happen nowadays. Like she interviews poachers, and But the woman who wrote The Dragon Behind the Glass didn't interview anybody who'd actually done anything illegal. So I think it's just like, I don't know if it's because they're different cultures or written at different times, certainly different practices. Like, I don't know if CITES and the law have really cracked down on the wildlife smuggling, that people, wouldn't want to be interviewed by a journalist nowadays. So another interesting non-fiction that I'm not going to rate, but still interesting to learn about that particular topic. Hang on, I have to feed Doofus, he's getting very hungry. I mean, I'm also very hungry, but I really need to get this filmed so I can edit it tonight. Anyway, where was I? So I started reading Some We Love, Some We Hate, Some We Eat, non-fiction, again, about anthrozoology and about the relationship between humans and non-human animals. I'm not very far in, maybe like 20%. Trouble finding time and opportunity to read ebooks, but I'm going to use that word again. It is interesting. It's a series of small, quite short chapters focusing on different elements and situations where humans and animals coexist or interact in some way. There was a chapter about how children torture animals sometimes, and whether that means that the child will grow up to be a psychopath. It was so infuriating, that chapter, because the conclusion they kind of came to, even though, within the short few pages they had, was that not every child who tortures an animal grows up to be a psychopath. And they're like, maybe, on consideration, torturing animals when you're a child is normal behaviour. I was just like, no, it's not. What the hell is wrong with you? I've never tortured an animal. And the interviewer was talking to like normal, well-adjusted people in his life, and they recounted some of the things they'd done as children. It's just like, oh my god, like horrifying. It's like, just because you're a normal person now, you were not a normal child. And I like to think I'm not biased against all Americans, but there was some moments where like sometimes they say, oh, we were just bored and lived out in the middle of nowhere, so we thought we'd torture a cat. It's like, that, I feel like that's a crazy American thing to say. Never known anyone to be bored enough where they think that's a normal thing to do. Let's do that. So that chapter left me going, no, what the fuck is wrong with you kids? So that was infuriating. Other chapters deal with things like therapy dolphins, animals used in like laboratory experiments, and how the researchers feel about connections they may or may not form with those animals. I can't think at the top of my head of any other examples of what. You can tell one of those chapters stuck with me more than the others. But like I say, I'm only 1/5 of the way in. There was a chapter about like introducing the concept of anthrozoology. So I'll keep going with that and we'll see what I think by the end. And then the fourth book that I read for this challenge this month, one of the more controversial groups in the UK is Extinction Rebellion. And they have a book called This Was Not a Drill. Again, a collection of essays. I haven't quite finished the book yet. I'm about 60% of the way through. It's got sort of themes in the different sections of the book. So the first section was kind of about making you aware of the climate crisis, which is a weird thing to, maybe they feel they have to include that in the book, but surely if you've picked up the book. But maybe it's more just to drive the point home and like make sure everyone's on the same page. Well, my favourite essay from that section was from the former president of the Maldives. Seeing it from like a political view and the real like strong determination of the message they were getting out was like, we will not stand for this. We are not just gonna sit by and idly drown, basically. And there was some really interesting chapters on kind of intersectional information, so like comparing the war on drugs to the war on the environment. And actually there was another chapter which also compared even more closely addiction to drugs with addiction to fossil fuels. But that was the chapter on deep adaptation, which is a slightly terrifying philosophy. And that's why I haven't got all the way through this book, is because even though it's really short, I kind of have to take it in like chunks. When it's something like that, I can't just breezily listen to it or read through it. The second section, the one I'm in at the moment, it's specifically about their roadblock protests and movements that they closed down traffic in London, central London, in I think it was 2018, and that was what really got them like into the news and made them a really well-known household name in the UK, in the social demographic that I live in. I don't know if everyone has heard of them, but I kind of assume they have. And so the essays in that are from different people who took part in the event and their role and their experience. So like one chapter is from someone who's handcuffed to like a railing, I think, or road infrastructure, and was arrested, and about their experience of being arrested. The chapter I'm reading at the moment is from a cook who organised all the food and catering and hospitality during the event, because it went on for 10 days, I think. And about their experience of like people being so keen to like volunteer their time and resources, and also just like really practical steps that they're recommending about logistics around catering for thousands of people for 10 days. I'm gonna use that word again. Really interesting. Maybe that's what it comes down to. I feel like all my non-fiction reviews are like, it's either interesting or it's not interesting. That's it. That's the rating. Never mind the stars. Was it interesting to read/listen to? So I'm making my way through my original TBR that I talked about right at the very beginning of this month. But I have also had some books added to this TBR. I think This Is Not a Drill wasn't on the original list, but I filmed that introduction on like the 28th or 29th of June. Can't quite remember, but the important point being, on the 30th of June, we had a sustainability festival at work, and one of the stalls there was from Greenpeace, and they had books on display, not for sale, but just like recommendations. And so I went through their table and took photos of the books that looked interesting. And so that's how a few more have got added to this TBR. If I am able to finish Some We Love, Some We Hate, Some We Eat before the end of the month, then the next ebook I'd like to read is called It's Not Too Late, because I think I need a bit of positivity. I also bought a book at Waterstones called Soonish, which I think is in a similar vein to 39 Ways to Save the Planet, in that it's about technology and what technology could do to make things better and get us out of this problem. But I think 39 Ways to Save the Planet is about technology now, and Soonish is about things in the future. So yeah, we're halfway through July now. In terms of how my plastic-free July is going generally, it's all fairly on track. The only plastic I accidentally bought was, so I bought myself a new watch because I keep having problems with my old one. Oh, I mean, it's a boring explanation. But anyway, I bought a watch online because I needed one quickly. And I thought it was okay. It came in cardboard packaging in a cardboard box. But when I opened up the actual box to get the watch out, there was like a plasticky foam kind of cut in the shape of the watch, to hold it in place. But I think it's been pretty successful so far. I mean, we're only halfway through, but a good start. But yeah, so good start to the month, good reading, all looking very positive. Now I really do need to go and get some dinner. It's curry tonight.